Retro Future.
Yeah, okay, we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new, long overdue episode of the Anachronistic Society. The episode where we have multiple guests to discuss a singular topic on Radio Retro Future. And I don't know if you, Lee and Glenn, who are our guests, I don't know if you can see the video right now, if you have it in front of you.
It's live.
But I have probably one of the most iconic Dieselpunk buildings on screen right now that you can find in the Netherlands, which is Radio Kootwijk. And it's probably one of the most evil looking buildings I have seen, or at least I have seen in the Netherlands. So yeah, I thought it was very appropriate for this episode.
It is.
Yes. It's you can see it from the pictures I have here. I have multiple ones of them. This is a normal looking one. There are tourists with bicycles here with the fountain running. Then I have this one, which is what it originally looked like in the 1920s when it was constructed. You see the joke about this particular building, about Radio Kootwijk, is it's completely made of concrete. There is there's not a piece of metal in there, because as you can see, it has this huge mast, and nothing had to interfere with that mast because it maintained radio connection with the Dutch Indies. Oh. Yes. And also it is this high because it needed to cool. So it's actually a kind of a huge cooling installation. So another reason why they couldn't put any metal in there. And also if you look for Radio Kootwijk, you also see it's constructed like a sphinx. You know, because this didn't look evil enough. When you see it sideways, you see the tower, and then you see the main body of the lion, so to speak. So
they just wanted to do something special.
Yeah, basically,
just because they can.
Yeah. Well, it needed to be a very special construction. You know, it was probably one of the most powerful radios in existence at that point. At least I think. I don't really know that much about radios, but it must have been one of the most powerful ones if it could go half across the world to Indonesia. So.
You of Radio Retro Future don't know things about radios. That's.
Let me show you something even more ironic. If you look at the screen, I'm gonna activate the opening to Radio Retro Future. You see that? You see that on top of the letters?
Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah. So yeah, there are some I know about radios, but yeah, of all the things, I am not that technical, unfortunately, which is really a shame. Because I really want to learn more about radios. I find radio signals, I do find them fascinating, like number stations. I do find those things fascinating and creepy as hell.
They are.
Yes. So, but yeah, we are not here to talk about radios, well, not yet anyway. We're actually here to talk about Akroydiesel Age by Lee Andercheck, who also wrote a piece on it on the Netherlands and apparently Belgium. So we're gonna discuss and speculate on what a kind of a Dieselpunk future for the Netherlands could look like, and in Belgium as well, I guess. But yeah, Lee, let's just start with what is Akroydiesel Age? And you know, what are the most important things about the history of that gaming world?
So it is a Dieselpunk retro future in the future. It takes place in the year 2714. Society goes on more or less. The world unifies. Everything's fun and happy until 2200, where things more or less go to shit. And not to dwell too long on that. That's hundreds of years in the past now. And society has changed and evolved, but lots of bad things have happened in the interim. And one of those is most cogently here, like 40 to 50 meters of sea level rise, which, you know, is going to put much of the Netherlands underwater. But given the transhumanist level technology that they obtained in the 2000s before things went to shit, they were able to do things like turn Almere into a giant floating island, or erect storm walls around Amsterdam that prevents it from being flooded, such that there are still like parts that should be underwater but are not.
Also, what is Akroy of a resource?
So the thing that occurred is referred to as the Green Fall, and basically, I don't know if you were familiar with the Grey Goo Apocalypse. It basically postulates that a molecule that could be built to just a nanite that just eats oil and replicates itself, and then eats all the oil, and then just stops doing anything. Could be repurposed to theoretically eat everything, and then just swallow every kind of molecule on accident, basically. In my world, something a little bit different happens, where deliberate sabotage is made, where such a molecule is made to consume all organic life, and is launched from satellites across the globe. And that, you know, goes very poorly. And what's happened is that the slurry that produces after eating all of this life forms and soaking into the ground becomes Akroydiesel, which can be split into two parts. Akroy, which is a mutagen and a fertilizer, and diesel, which is a fuel for, you know, combustion engines. It's not quite the diesel that we know and love, but it is still, it serves the same function, even though it comes from a different source. And it means that the fossil fuel distribution is totally different, and the air quotes fossils are much more recent. The Akroydiesel age comes to be off the back of very recently liquefied life forms, and that's part of the whole irony of the setting, I suppose you could say.
Right. Great. Sounds great. So, what's your reaction to that, Glenn?
Well, first of all, I know the Netherlands are a great country to that beats their water problems. So actually, in your story, Belgium is fucked.
Nice. I will say that, like, the southeastern half of Belgium is, you know, hundreds of meters above sea level.
Yeah.
But I mean, remember that even the Danish survive the rising waters. They're called the Danefangs now, but because like it's a one world government by the time that people are making these upgrades, so the Netherlands have to share. And so that's why Belgium is still around, because Netherlands had to share.
Oh, that's just perfect. But that's great, because I love the south of Belgium, the Ardennes.
Right.
So we'll all live there. So that's fine by me.
Right. Yeah, it's funny thing. But before we go into the lore of Tiefland, as it is currently called, I wanna note the. I also love the Shadowrun series, like I explained in our earlier stream we did, where you talked about Akroydiesel age, the rule set. So if people want to learn more about Akroydiesel age, go check out that video. I'll put it down in the comments. I want to comment on what Shadowrun has done with the Netherlands, because I thought it was really good. Even though they don't have that much on it, they do go in some detail, especially on the Europort. Now, for people that don't know, the Europort is basically the zone around Rotterdam and all its the surrounding countries, villages, cities. I think Den Haag is officially also part of the Europort, or it's been swallowed by it in the meantime. So this is this huge industrial and logistical hub that basically transports, I think, the majority of the goods into Europe. That's why it's also called the Europort, because what people need to understand about the Netherlands is, and why it's been so successful from, well, the Middle Ages and onward, is because of its access to the sea. It has all these major rivers coming together, flowing underneath and through Rotterdam into Germany and the land beyond there. So it's
you guys almost live in the water. So
oh yeah, well, we live underwater, technically speaking.
Yeah. That's right.
And it's been really important. Like there was once this discussion, like, oh yeah, how the environment, like the physical environment, affected human culture. Well, the Netherlands wouldn't be the Netherlands without that fight against the water. Because the funny thing about the Netherlands is that it always had a kind of democratic kind of a democratic system in place. Because in order to prevent the rivers from flooding, the cities had to work together. So the cities always had these organizations already back in the Middle Ages that, you know, made sure that you know, there was water management, so to speak. And money was sent to these organizations, and, well, monks also had an important role, but, you know, a single monastery cannot control the entire Rhine, you know. So, you have this complete political structure in place. And then you've got, well, you had the Spanish ruling over the Netherlands. That didn't end up going all too well for the Dutch, especially because the Spanish were fighting a lot of wars, and wars need a lot of money, and the Netherlands happened to be the one of the richest places they could get money from. So, yeah, that ended up in revolt. And, well, the Dutch already had this system, you know, this political system in place. And yeah, that's basically the system they used to create what became known as the Dutch Republic. So yeah, and that's all thanks to the fight against water, thanks to adversity. And I think that's a very important element about the Dutch as a people. You know, there's this saying, I struggle, and I keep above the water. And yeah, that's, I think, a very important part of the Dutch character, even to this day. And I hope that's something they maintain, because it's a very useful trait to have. But yeah, to continue, I was actually talking about what Shadowrun had done with the Netherlands. And they basically focus a lot on the Europort, and the fact that dragons, like Loftweer, who is also the president of Mercedes-Benz, or Souter Group as it's called in the game, is personally involved in making sure that the Europort gets rebuilt after this massive flood. And also something very funny, what they did with the flood in Shadowrun is that the coastal areas had to be evacuated. Now, for people that are not familiar with the Shadowrun setting, it's the future. However, there are also, all of a sudden, elves, orcs, trolls, all these magical creatures came into the world. And all these people moved to, well, the mainland, so to speak. You know, Gelderland, you know, the east side of the country. So you had all these humans, trolls, elves, orcs all living together because they had nowhere to go, resulting in a high... well, a lot of empathy between the various races, which is also another trait you see through, well, Dutch history, but I don't want to talk too long about this. But yeah, that's also a very important thing about the Netherlands, and which those two things the Shadowrun setting did very well in, well, relatively a short story. So yeah, what was your idea, Lee, when you created Thiefland? What did you base that on?
I mean, like, to clarify, this is like the real world Earth, so a lot of it is very closely off of like actual Dutch stuff. But I guess it was an amalgamation of like modern Netherlands, and you have things like the Hanseatic League, obviously, and there's the history of democracy. Yeah, I have the Dutch monarchy slightly reasserting itself during the lost age. Until this period of chaos, and then, you know, transitioning back to a democracy. And I think that it's interesting to look at the history there, but also I think the struggle and adversity against water and other environmental factors is great in terms of what's going on. And being a trade hub is very important as well. And so being Dieselpunk, that means not just sea, but also air, right? And I think that that's allowed a lot of interesting things to happen in terms of, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I could say, but Glenn, what were you going to say?
Oh, nothing in particular, but I didn't know the story, didn't know anything about it, but I just love the idea. Mm-hmm. Even though I'll be with my feet in the water.
Oh, where are you? Are you in Belgium?
Yes. And well, actually just at the west side, northern west side of Belgium. So West Flanders.
Yeah, nice, because that's there's a system in the game called Origins, not to dwell on it too long, but basically the three Belgian origins are you can be from Brussels, or you can be Flemish or Wallonian. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that it will all, but also the French are invading. So, which is another issue. It's called Europa Burning, this expansion pack, because there's a big war going on.
I'm like about 2 kilometers from France. So again, I'm deeply
Underwater or under occupation?
Oh, damn you!
So
Yeah.
basically, it's the same old story for Belgium.
Yeah, I'm screwed.
Yeah. Well, that is the history of Belgium. I mean, you were basically created in the 19th century as a kind of a buffer zone between between Germany and France. So, well, the same kind of goes for Netherlands, but yeah.
Actually, I looked into the history of the name, and it turns out that there's like, I don't know what they're. Actually, I know what they're called, or rather, I have it written down in my notes somewhere. Where's the fucking prestige regiment thing? But basically, there's this really ancient group of people who are technically like from the area that roughly is Belgium. Yeah, and they were infamous for being able to easily cross water because, you know, the Low Country, like, there's lots of rivers. And they totally took an enemy army by surprise, just going across a river without any place to ford or anything, just wiping them out. And the Romans really valued to them as auxiliaries for this reason.
Oh, yes, yes.
Reverse the water.
But,
The old Belgians, yeah.
Wasn't the entire region called Flanders, like including the entirety of the Netherlands?
It was during like the medieval period. I don't know, like the stuff that I had to go back to, because I talked to another Dutch guy, because I was like, tell me about your military history. And he's like, well, we have many great and storied admirals, and for the land we hired mercenaries 90% of the time. So I had to go back a little ways to find, like, you know, because every state of the Republic, which, to clarify, I realize now that the some of the, like, ADA background is necessary, but they're part of a larger country called the Republic, which is mostly made up of Germany. But each state has a prestige regiment, and their prestige regiment is the Batavians.
All right, yeah. I'm not sure if the Batavians is a real tribal name, because I need to check that out. I'm not sure, but the Batavians could have been a name fabricated in the 19th century during the Napoleonic era, as a kind of create a kind of a spirit de corps for the Dutch. Because
the French called like the Batavian Republic is what they called the Netherlands.
Republic, yeah.
So like a really, really old Roman thing that's like not really relevant anymore.
Yeah.
So they probably just came up with it. Something that is calling them Belgians. And so they did that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the funny thing is what the Dutch are really known for, like you already said, you mentioned the crossing water thing, was engineers. Also, for example, the people that helped the French escape from the Russian army when retreating from Russia were Dutch engineers. So they're really, really well known for being military engineers. That's, well, of course, also for, you know, famous for sea admirals. And the Dutch also created the first standing army. That's also actually a Dutch invention by Maurits, the son of William of Orange. So, yeah, that's a Dutch invention. Maurits never really got to experiment with it. One reason is he detested open field battles, because he thought them to be a waste of manpower and resources, which is entirely true. So he really focused on designing siegecraft, developing siegecraft. He also, like, for example, standardizing your military equipment so everyone is using the same kind of guns and ammo. He, well, I wouldn't say he invented it, but, he was the first one to actually, lay down the rules, like turning soldiers into, well, an actual profession rather than just mercenaries that basically did a seasonal work, which was the norm in those days. So yeah, he basically started with not using mercenary armies in Europe for a change. So,
so he was the first to keep war a little bit fair.
Well, I don't know about fair, but he was like I guess the inventor of the modern army, as we understand it today, like armies being in service of the state rather than individual warlords who do it as a kind of a thing of principle. Like, you know, Alpha, who was the first Spanish warlord to come to the Netherlands, you know, is a wonderful example of that. He paid for that army himself. You know, he died a poor man after his campaign, because, you know, he spent all the money on the war effort, and the the Spanish crown never paid him back for that. So, and here you have the Dutch state army developed later by Maurits, and that was actually the army of the state. So it wasn't an army loyal to an individual, it was an army in service of the state. So that's, you can imagine, that was quite a military revolution.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's that would have an impact on. It's funny that my friend said I would basically tired mercenaries when he made the transition away from that. But yeah, I think like they like to focus in European history because we're Americans. We like big things on basically only the really large countries, and they don't appreciate, you know, the significant contributions to modernity of countries like the Netherlands or Belgium, because, you know, it's not one of the big ones that fought in World War II. I mean, you did fight in World War II. But, you know, it's not France,
the Americans got defeated here in World War II.
Exactly. It didn't go well.
Well, it really is a shame. Like, I ask a lot of people from America, I ask them about, have you heard of American Market Garden? I live very close to Arnhem, so that battle where I lived actually took place here. Many of the Americans never heard of Operation Market Garden or the Battle of Arnhem. So, yeah, it's...
Ask them if they've seen... They should ask them if they've seen The Thin Red Line, because I feel like some Americans have probably seen that movie but forgotten was that's about.
I don't know the movie The Thin Red Line. I do know the movie, what was it called again? A Bridge Too Far.
Sorry, yeah, that's... Sorry, Thin Red Line's about something. Yeah, Bridge Too Far is the film that I was thinking of.
Yeah. And I think it's mentioned slightly in, what was it called again? Band of Brothers. I think they were fighting in the vanguard of that assault, and they captured some towns, and, you know, then it just grinded to a halt after the defeat at Arnhem.
Yeah, I guess so. I think I remember that one. So.
Yeah, I remember some scenes, but they were not really relevant to Operation Market Garden from the Dutch episodes. But yeah, it's my father lived through that period. And another piece of Dutch history, so to speak, is the Dutch war winter, the winter of 94-95, which, well, you had basically the Netherlands were, from the German perspective, were cut in half as the Allied, you know, were ramming themselves into the Netherlands and a bit into Germany, but they couldn't take Arnhem. So instead of trying again, they just said, yeah, fuck it, we're just moving around it. Which also cost them dearly, but yeah, it was either that or try again. Which you can imagine is not that great for morale. So they were thinking, okay, fuck it, we're gonna wait. And we're just gonna starve the Germans out of Holland. Except that people like my father, as a little boy, were living there. So yeah, they were also starving the normal population. So my father, as a little boy, he must have been like 10 years old, took his little sister all the way to Groningen, which is the north of the Netherlands. There were, you know, the farms, which were, well, basically untouched, because you can imagine the Allies were bombing the city centers. So yeah, there was nothing in the cities anymore. So a lot of parents sent their children like, here, go to Groningen. The Germans won't stop you because you're children. and the Germans didn't. So yeah, my father spent his days on a farm of a complete stranger, like a lot of children did from that part of the country. The Allies did drop bread above Holland eventually, when they realized they were actually starving the indigenous population. And for some reason, the Germans didn't steal the bread. So that happened.
Guess the Germans weren't hungry.
Yeah, apparently. Well, they did take all the bicycles, so you know it's only fair that we kept the bread, I guess. Which is still a joke we're still making to this day. Bring me back my bicycles.
Well, that brings me to a very important happening in the Second World War in Belgium also. Battle of the Ardennes. So actually we did make name in that war. Well, actually we didn't do anything there, so it was just the Americans against the Germans. But they did it on our ground, so yay.
Yeah. I'm trying to recall, was it the First World War or the Second World War you attempted to stop the Germans with turnabout trains?
Yeah.
Or was it both?
I think both. But in the First World War there was one thing that Belgium did just perfectly, and that was the flooding the river, the Azer.
Right. Yeah,
so, yes, the hydroponic warfare that nobody else really has is the plan to blow various dams and stuff and just flood.
Yeah, the Germans tried to cross it, or wanted to cross it. There was like a few guys, or I don't know exactly how it went, but they thought, yeah, let's open the water gates. And, well, they didn't drown or anything, but they just couldn't cross it because it was so muddy and full of water, and that was the only part that didn't got taken that time. That was a small corner in the very northwest of Belgium.
Am I only? Yeah, I'm looking at the chat right now, and I just realized. Oh yeah, wait, guys, we have a chat. I completely forgot. Excuse me, everyone. Completely got up in the subject. 12DD, welcome back. Did you only intend to show this building? Well, it's the only image I got queued up right now, but it's one of my favorite buildings in the Netherlands, I must admit. But while we're talking, I guess I can look up some other images as well. 12DD, that's a very pretty building. Yes, Chris, it is. It reminds me of the towers from Hoover Dam in the Fallout New Vegas. It's probably inspired by the same architectural style.
Very brutalist.
It's apparently a tower used in the Netherlands to communicate with the Dutch Indies. Yes, it is, Chris. Java. Very ironic that you have the name Java behind it. Yes, wasn't this stream supposed to be about the alternate version of Holland, of the Netherlands? Holland is a province of the Netherlands. 2 provinces, actually. Yes, FellQ, 12DD, you actually corrected yourself. I didn't see that yet. So, let's... well, the thing is, right, when you want to talk about an alternate version of the Netherlands, right, you need to understand how the Netherlands came to be. And the way, you know, how it is with or fight against the water. You know, the Dutch also used the water. You know, whenever the enemy came, they would put things underwater by destroying a dike or two. So all that is so important. You can't talk about the Netherlands without, you know, how it will develop, in what way, without understanding that essential part of history. Because it plays into the military, plays into the politics, it plays into, well, basically everything. I even say the character of the Dutch people. You already talked a little bit on how you came to create your alternate history of the Low Countries, Lee. Are there any other things you want to expand on in the future of your version of Tiefland? How did you come to the word Tiefland, by the way?
Well, that's something that I reworked because some Dutch people have told me it doesn't always sound like. Basically, I just tried to find like a slightly more German way to say Lowlands. Part because like the Republic is slightly more Germanic in that it is. I mean, like I think the 12 founding states were almost all German and incorporated parts of, it incorporates Austria, parts of northern Italy, and then the Dutch states, and then most recently not the Netherlands, Denmark. Yeah, that was my attempt, and I don't really know German, so I didn't really have any language background there. People have been telling me just call it Netherlands. People in Germany just call it the Netherlands, so just use that if you have to. Or just calling like collectively. I think my original idea was just to say the Lowlands, but now they're two different. So yeah, states rather. I posted in lobby something.
I'm trying to figure out what other names the Netherlands have had. Well, of course, it had like the Kingdom of the Netherlands. That has been an official name. You've had simply the Republic or the Dutch Republic. That's a name it carried until Napoleon. And after that, we were the London van Herwaarts over, and I think Herwaarts over also means something like low country. So yeah, the Netherlands really identified themselves with being very, very flat, which is not necessarily true for where I live, but it is true when you go to Rotterdam. I don't like going to that region because it's all artificial. All the land you see around you is artificial. It's all made there. It was all sea, and then the Dutch were like, it needs more land, and there was more land. A matter of fact, a lot of Germany, the former marshes of Germany were also colonized by Dutch settlers. The Germans would literally hire hire Dutch farmers and say, okay, you can live here. And then you can make it land. Will you do that? And the Dutch farmers were like, yes, we can do that. And that's how much of the Netherlands were created. of Germany was created. We've been very good at outsourcing ourselves to foreign nations, kind of think of it.
We in Belgium, we did just the same. Because we started off, I guess there's a Spanish... there were the Spanish who had Belgium in their power, then the Austrians, then the Netherlands, then France, then I guess again the Netherlands, and only then it became Belgium. So that's just And then we did some other things too, because we thought, everybody took Belgium for its own. Now we're going to do the same, and we took Congo.
Well, your king took Congo. To be fair.
Yeah, he did very, very stupid and bad things there.
Well,
that's just history.
Yeah.
He set up brutal waffle factories where they made waffles in very unsanitary conditions.
No, actually more gruesome than that, but...
For reference, there was a horrible genocide. Yeah, but... yeah.
No, actually the waffles are good, so they couldn't be that bad.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. So do I have it right that one of the countries doesn't eat stroop waffles and the other one does? Or is that thing all over?
Sorry?
Right? Stroop waffles? I need to look this up.
Stroop
waffles. Oh, yeah.
Well, it's a Dutch delicacy. I don't know if it's...
That's Dutch. That's Dutch. We don't do that. We have Brussels waffles. We have Leukse waffles. We have all kinds of waffles, but not with stroop.
That's great because that's I joke, but that's what the Belgians revolt against. The tyranny of the stroop waffle.
Oh my God! It's a war about pastries.
Oh, and beer. We have the better beer.
Well, since a year or 10, we now have Apocalitic, which is some of the best beer I ever tasted. So
I don't even know it, so it couldn't be that good.
Well, it's rather new, but it also has been rather expensive for a time. But the special thing about Apocalitic, and once again we're going to have to talk about Dutch history, it's one of the few beers made with fruit.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess if we meet again this year,
we do like Kriek.
No, I don't like Kriek, which is
it's also fruit. So, and we do it like already.
I didn't mean fruit. I meant like grout. Like you've got like hops.
Yeah.
But before that, we used grout. I don't know what the English word. I think it's simply a bastardized version of Groots or something. It's more like a herbal melange. It's also very local. The story.
So it's like a herb.
It's like herbs. I think there are herbal melange. That's why they're all local, because they all had to, use different herbs to flavor their beer and stuff. So, but the thing about it was that one thing that very few people know is that the Dutch grew rich from beer. They discovered that the Germans were using hops in their beer instead of grout, which is easier to preserve. So hops you can actually transport over long distance, while groot beers you couldn't. So everyone in the Netherlands switched to hops, because hops also grew great here in the Netherlands. So we had this entire beer industry build up and then exported to Germany, England, and all the surrounding countries. However, then taxation happened and hops was being taxed to oblivion. And then Haarlem, which is one of the place near Amsterdam, was like, wait, we can use grout because it isn't taxed yet. So they started using grout again, and then Haarlem became rich of Jope Koit. And Koit is a reference to the measurement of barrel. Because of tax purposes, they had to use the same types of barrels. So, yay for tax. Let's see, there were some more comments. Actually, it's very busy in the chat today. Didn't you say that Holland is like your first vegan girlfriend? Yes, flat and completely uninteresting. It is. This Grossvergaat, Vergastim, I'm not gonna translate that because Google might actually, put a strike on my channel. Google Translate will not tell me what you mean. Yes, it's a WW2 joke. Let's see. Yeah, London van Herwart over me, the lands of yonder. Yeah. As opposed to the Burgundian Inderlands. Yes, Dutch, we don't do Dutch. Not sure what you're meaning there, Double D. I'm going to change the subject here for a moment. I need a good name for a killer clown character in New Vegas. Any ideas?
Yeah, I gave him my best shot. It doesn't have that good ring though.
Hunker's blood money. Well, it works. He likes it enough. It doesn't have a ring to it. Gee, well, you can, I guess, call him Trump or Clinton. Those both work.
Shots now.
Bunkers, casino, tutors. I like tutors.
I don't know why I said that, but it was the first thing that came to mind.
Right, but yeah, Glenn, what would your alternate history of Belgium be?
Well, I'm more of a steampunk guy, so yeah, it would be steampunk, but definitely an end of the world thing.
Okay.
I just love. I like stories that involve the end of the world, or more like very, very tough time that we had to pass before we get where we are now. Something like that. But maybe less water.
Maybe less water.
Yeah. I like water, but not that much that I would be with my feet in it every day. So.
But what would the role of Belgium be in that world?
I don't even know if Belgium would still exist. In that case, I don't really care that much. I guess I would love it, if Belgium would play a big role, but for such a small country in times like that, it would easily be erased.
Well, I mean, Belgium is a very interesting case because you basically have the Belgium is like you've got these two types of people packed together in one country: the Wallonians and the Flemish. Then you've got some other like German and Dish.
But we all get along. We're all friends.
Well, do you though?
Yes, actually, we do. We speak 2 or even 3 different languages, but it's still yay Belgium. If there's football on TV or the Belgian team has to go play in Russia in a few weeks, we're all one country. And when they're done playing, it's back to
okay, but let's talk about this end of the world scenario because. Because of the language, the difference in language, and in an end of the world scenario, I think humans are really easy to fall back in a kind of very tribal state, if you know what I mean. Tribes, in this case, language has been a very important identity changer in history. Until the nation states came about and said, well, this is the way you're supposed to speak. Or you're supposed to be one nation, in case what happened to Belgium, I guess. So I expect there to be, less than ideal relations between these 2 language groups.
Yeah, that's right. Eventually, Belgium will be divided, and I guess the Flemish will turn to the Dutch. And the Walloons will turn to France or something.
Yeah. Very likely. And
not that I want that, but it's indeed very likely.
Yeah, most likely scenario. Yeah.
And then you'll have a few.
Make that interesting though. Like you could about a Flemish on Wallonian conflict, or alternatively, rather than a rising sea level. You could have like another ice age and a lowering sea level, bringing the Baltic Sea to make it even lower, so that you then have all that newly exposed land, and the Flemish and Wallonians are fighting over it. The real cheap got, and like Brussels got impacted by some meteorite, and it's the steampunk resource that people like now burn to be able to run their steampunk tech, in like the steam engines or whatever. It's what makes it work. And so now, who's on either side of Brussels? Wallonians and the Flemish, and now they're duking it out.
Ooh, I love that idea.
Yeah. Have you seen Frostpunk, the video game?
It looks really cool.
Yeah, it's great.
It does.
I've done a review on it if you want to learn more about it. Now I'm working on a review on Diluvian, which is also about humanity suffering under an ice age, but instead they fled underwater.
Wow, that's cool. We have an interesting suggestion from the chat here. Ray Alwander says, alternate history for Belgium. What if Crown Prince William of the Netherlands had succeeded in rebelling against his father William I and to become the first king of Belgium?
Prince William of the Netherlands. Does he mean William II?
Crown Prince William of the. I'm not 100%. I haven't studied this much of history. I think William II of the Netherlands comes up when I Google that, so I assume yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe. William the First character was in part responsible for the Belgian revolt, I suppose. Not sure it could have stopped it, but it would be an interesting, no matter the case, how it happened, it would be an interesting alternative history to see what happened if the Netherlands and Belgium stayed one country. That would be a very interesting scenario, because you have both the harbors of Antwerp and Rotterdam in one country. I mean,
my God, that would be big. Yeah.
That's huge. Well, now we're going to talk about a different strain of Williams. And I mean the stadhouder William II, who became King of England and actually managed to create a successful succession instead of what happened. Did you know that there was actually a Dutch King of England?
William of Orange, yeah?
No, not William of Orange. His grandson, I think. Was it his great grandson? I think his great grandson, I think, was king of England for a time. So it would have been really interesting to see if there was a continuous union between the Netherlands and England.
Oh, yeah, because I mean, two huge competing powers during the Age of Exploration just unified like that. All of a sudden, all those colonial holdings merge under one flag.
Yeah, yeah. Because what people tend to forget, we had one of the biggest colonial empires, because we had Indonesia. Indonesia is not a small area. It's like 15 times the size of the Netherlands. It's ridiculous.
And the Caribbean too. I think that's how I learned that the Netherlands existed. Was I played Sid Meier's Pirates, and you could be a Dutch pirate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing with the Caribbean is, well, first the Dutch founded New York. It was called New Amsterdam. It's actually where the name Yankee comes from, because it's a bastardization of the name Jan Kees. But you know, the colonists couldn't pronounce it, so they fucked it up into Yankees. But then the British took New Amsterdam. However, I think they actually lost that war with the Netherlands. Then the Dutch decided, in their wisdom, to trade New Amsterdam for Sint Maarten, I think it was. And they might already have some other islands there in that vicinity. I think that's how it happened. Or was it the Dutch Antilles? I don't really recall which island it was, but it doesn't sound like a good trade to me. But you know, it's still part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands till this day, which I often
Northeast just isn't that. Period. Northeast isn't nearly as profitable as the Caribbean, because Caribbean's where all that, you know, the sugar plantations are. So I can see that decision being made, and it wouldn't become a financial capital for decades. So yeah.
But
as I understand it,
speaking of Wycherley, what happens to the Dutch kingdom? What happens to all those islands, Sint Maarten and such? Because they're also part of the Netherlands, officially.
So what happens is during the Green, so like dependent on a global mesh network, internet infrastructure. The atmosphere is scarred, and the methods of communications are damaged, and actually all radios for a time cease to work, and they have to develop a radio shielding technology that transmissions are made, and there are other strange atmospheric anomalies that get in the way of radio waves. So generally speaking, for hundreds of years, there's no contact with anybody who's outside of Europe, more or less. Right. So the Netherlands and Belgium have to get along with just who they can like communicate with by like sending a runner or something like that, or having a landline that they put back up to them.
Yeah, Caribbean, in a rowboat, basically.
Yeah, the Caribbean have become independent. You have and Republio Tejas, formerly Republic of Texas, and Gran Colombia, which is a North South American state, which did exist in real life very briefly, but doesn't exist anymore, a union of several countries. And they're having a war for supremacy over the Caribbean, and odds are like those places have some trace of a Dutch heritage, but they don't belong to the Republic. They probably, you know, like scholars are probably aware of the relationship, but there's no functional political relationship in the time that ADA is taking place.
Yeah, sounds logical. Sounds acceptable. After a few hundred years, it's probably very unlikely some white guy can come up. Well, probably not a white guy, but some guy from the Netherlands can come up. Hey, we used to be the kings here like a few hundred years ago. Would you like, you know? I would be curious if they can still speak Dutch though, because they do learn Dutch there. Probably.
I delve into like the degradation of language to some degree in ADA, and like to the point where there are almost mutually unintelligible like languages up and down the American East Coast. So I imagine that like they probably speak how we would do is like a Dutch cant.
Right.
Can't understand them, but if you spend like a week figuring it out, you can learn that cant, and now you can, as long as you know the parent language. So like the parent language would be Dutch, and then they would be able to learn that and go figure it out.
Yeah, I just want to answer quickly a question in the chat by 12DD. Yes, today I actually had an idea on making a review for Borderlands. It's not going to be a review in the sense of a typical game review. It's more going to be like a commentary on the aesthetics. Because making a review on the game at this point is kind of little late behind the facts, but I did get some ideas after starting to write a kind of a retrospective on Fallout. I might talk about them at the same time. So yeah, there's that. So I have some ideas for it, but it's not going to be a classical review. It's going to be something a little different. Glenn, are you still there, or are you still getting?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to tell you a secret. I'm one of the few Belgians probably that doesn't like beer that much.
Okay.
I drink it, but it's just I'll
Heresy.
I'll rather have a rum or a whiskey or an absinthe or. Than beer, but yeah. But I'm still here. I'm listening to every word.
All right.
Can I ask him some questions right quick, or like get some impressions? Because this might be fun.
Okay.
In Ada, like you have locational origins from where you're from, which means I have to sometimes make decisions about places that I know basically nothing about, and. Like broadly speaking, there are 4 core stats in ADA: perception, strength, and you get some from where you're from. And so I just pasted this in the main lobby on Anachronistic order. But if you check it out, if you're from Brussels, you get +3 to perception, +2 to charisma. You get +2 strength, +2 agility. And if you're Flemish, you get +5 perception. There's some other stuff listed there, but how do you like that take?
Well, actually, I don't know what to think about it, but yeah, why not?
So include some fun things like, technically speaking, Flemish, you can learn to talk to Dutch or German speakers can learn how to talk to you.
Yeah.
And is Dutch or French people.
Well, especially here in Belgium, you can see that very fast. The Flemish-speaking people here in Belgium can learn a lot of different languages. We can speak French, we can speak English, we can speak German. Well, some of us can. But if you go to the Walloons, they only speak French. They learn English or even Dutch sometimes in school, but they just can't speak it. They forget about it. It doesn't interest them.
So, like, are there actually like people in your country who you can't really talk to because they just speak a different language?
Well, yeah, I can speak French. I can speak English, and I speak Dutch, of course. But I know a lot of Flemish people that don't speak French, or don't speak French that well, so they can't speak to the French side of Belgium. We manage, and they manage, but on the other side, you have the Walloons who only speak French and don't even try to speak Dutch. Well, not all of them, but most of them.
Yeah.
And you can ask every guy or every person in Belgium, and they will tell you exactly the same.
Is it,
I know.
A quick question for Glenn. Is it, by the way, true you're not allowed to speak foreign languages in your city halls?
That is correct. They changed. They put in a law where even in my town, I guess, and in Ghent and all those towns, you need to speak Dutch if you live in the Flemish region. So if you're foreign, if you're from England or America or I don't know where, and you come to Belgium, they will speak English to you. If you come from France, they will speak French to you. But if you live in Flanders, they will speak Dutch to you. So even if you don't know Dutch, they will. And that's actually to encourage foreigners who come live in Flanders to learn the Flemish language.
Problem because you guys are so good at English that like foreigners will just be like, why don't I just live in this country and then never learn their language?
Yeah. We have the same thing happening over here. Like, you know, well, Glenn, you know Andy. Like Andy Fraser, right? And everybody speaks. The guy needs to needs to learn Dutch, but everybody speaks English to him.
Yeah.
And every English speaker here has the same problem. Yeah, I want to learn Dutch, but every Dutch person just starts automatically speak English to me.
Yeah, just because we can.
Yeah,
we can. So why? Yeah. We want to make it easy for everyone.
Yeah.
I know a guy who really learned that.
Then the government says, "Oh no, you can't do that. You have to speak Dutch."
Entirely because he played GTA San Andreas multiplayer on a persistent world server that was like entirely Dutch people, and he just like picked it up over time. Don't get some full immersion like that. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing with the Dutch is, in contrast to the Germans, who are, well, of course there are Germans that speak good English, but they have problems learning English because everything, all their media is dubbed in German on television and places like that. Well, we grew up watching English-voiced cartoons with subtitles.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, because there's not dubs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have.
I even learned to watch series without subtitles, so I can completely understand an English movie or series without having to read in Dutch or having someone in Dutch dubbing everything over.
Yeah. I also watch everything in English without subs, and I think that's for most Dutch people the case.
And that's even in Belgium here. You have the difference again with the Walloons. They dub everything. They take it from France, where they dub everything and then do the same in the Walloons.
No. Yeah, the Dutch are very well known for being multilingual. I mean, we learn German as a third language. Here in class, French is optional.
Yeah, we know that about you guys.
Yeah. So Germans, Dutch people speaking 3 languages isn't strange at all. 3 or 4 languages is actually pretty common, I think.
I think that's an important thing to know. Like, if you're thinking about like other countries in general as a place to put your retro future, is that so many different, like it's a crossroads of the world, and even though people might not think of it that way, like there's so much countries, it's got all these languages in it, it's got so much trade going on that it's a really interesting, and a lot of fantasy stuff, you know, they have like a port city that's really big and famous, and that's where like all these various races and stuff have mixed, where you can get all these different flavors of the world. And I'm like, you could do that with Antwerp or Rotterdam if you wanted to. Right. That's, you know, when you're making something like that, an alternative world, that's really worthwhile to look into. And also, if you look into the history of Hansa and the Hanseatic League, that's very similar to how things like the Forgotten Realms do. There's just a series of city-states, and they have spheres of influence. I'm like, well, there was kind of a period of European history where that was happening.
Yeah, well, the Hansa states are, you know, that part of democracy I mentioned, right? That cooperation between cities during the Dutch Revolt really went against the Spanish that way. So, and I think that's why, you know, I'm trying to recall, but I think that the Dutch Republic was the first, well, not necessarily a democracy, but I think it was the first attempt to create something of a democracy after the Roman Republic. It was not something they wanted to do intentionally. It was purely practical, because they attempted to get another king or queen. They approached Queen Elizabeth after they, dethroned Philip II of Spain, so to speak. They tried to get Queen Elizabeth of England to be their queen, which could have been very interesting. But she was like, no, I don't want war with the Spanish. And well, if you know your history, you know that didn't end up well. Instead, she sent two people as her representatives, so to speak. Long story short, both of them were terrible, and both of them were kicked out. And it's really a shame, because there were people at the English court who were very suitable for that role. People that understood the Dutch culture, understood Dutch politics. However, Queen Elizabeth was very nepotistic. And these two guys were really good at chatting themselves up. So it became completely disastrous. So this is like a typical case of where once individuals' poor choices went horribly wrong and basically created the Dutch Republic. If Queen Elizabeth would have said, "Oh yeah, I want to be your queen," we may have had a completely different history. Once again, going back about that union between England and the Netherlands, it could have happened so often, and it went wrong all because of one person's poor choices. It's quite incredible.
It's mostly like that. So
yeah,
there always has to be one person that ruins it for everyone.
Yeah, it's quite incredible how if that person just fought 10 more minutes about that decision, she would have may have come to a different conclusion. I'm not saying it would have been a better future, but I don't know. It is so interesting to speculate on what would happen. But yeah, both became colonial powers, so I don't know. Would have been very interesting.
But I would love to get back to the language parts, because if you would have another history, I guess the Dutch and the Belgians would, or at least the Flemish, would be like a hub for all the other countries to, I don't know, not to be the translator or something, but to be the connection, to be the connection between all those lands, and maybe that's an idea.
Well, it was most definitely something I wanted to talk about when speaking of an alternate history, of alternate future of the Netherlands. That's, the thing is, you have all this knowledge in the Netherlands. You have this great flood, right? Now, who are the people that are currently worldwide working on water problems? They are the Dutch. Yeah. So the Dutch would already have the knowledge what to do on floodings and stuff like that. And I mean it's very hard to speculate on the Delta works, because they're designed for exactly this problem and successful at it. I mean, if you look at how much the Netherlands have invested in preparing their rivers for like the next 50 years, like all the water sites have been heightened. I mean, we spent billions on that to make sure that the water can rise like I don't know how many meters, and nothing of any no serious damage would be done. But we have learned throughout history what will happen if we don't. So what happened at New Orleans, what was it, 10 years ago now?
The levee broke.
Yeah. Now, currently, Dutch engineers are trying to find solutions for New Orleans. So, but yeah, it's every time people want, solutions to their water problem, they go to the Netherlands. So it's
so actually we would be a turning point for the rest of the surviving world.
You know, if the... Well, I think that despite the fact that a lot of the country is way under the water level, more places would be spared than other places in the world that theoretically would be more safe.
Yeah. A lot of places are just like, you know, high up enough that it's not. Also, like I notice, if you look at a height map of the Netherlands, directly to the southeast of Almere, which is of course, you know, a post-war, you know, island basically made from the water.
Flavorland. Yeah.
There are hills. There are hills that would be above the waterline. Though I would say Miss Ryan brings up a good point about learning English, or learning other languages basically, which is that a lot of it like can't happen very efficiently in a classroom. You require some degree of immersion with other speakers. So I think that once you have that level that you have countries of just a variety of languages, it becomes easier to learn them. And I think it also becomes
true. That's so true.
Out as a trade language. If we want to talk about, for example, you know, like this is how I learned history, and maybe it's not accurate, but the line that they teach you in American history is basically that the Dutch had like trade and travel preeminence, but then they sort of got complacent, and that allowed the English to continue to innovate on sailing technology and outpace them. When never did that, or if there was a unified crown or something like that, something that results in the Dutch either remaining equivalent or surpassing the English Empire, or the British Empire, right? Dutch could become this trade language, and it would become better learned simply because it's around everywhere, the way English is, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think the Dutch was actually almost a trade language at some point, but
yeah, I'm sure it was a lot in
yeah,
it was almost because they did like the whole world with their ships.
Another nice historical detail about the Netherlands and trade. You're probably familiar with the Dutch port in Japan, right? The Dutch trading port.
Yeah.
Oh, what was it called again? You know why the Dutch were the only ones allowed to go there?
Because they were the only, like, they trusted like some merchant guy, and he lived on an island, so it was like a floating thing, so technically he wasn't on Japan.
Well, the thing was, something that the English scolded the Dutch for was that they didn't bring missionaries to Indonesia. Like, of course,
true.
Yeah. And the German and the Japanese were like, "Oh, these guys aren't interested in missionaries. Yeah, we can do business with them."
Yeah, that's true. Because if the Japanese found anything that had to do with Christianity or I don't know what, they would take it away and burn it or something, or
yeah,
they totally discuss anything that had to do with anything other than their own religion.
Yeah. So the Dutch were not a missionary country. We had this concept of tolerance, which was part of. Well, I don't know if you can call it a constitution, but which was part of the foundation of Dutch law of tolerance. Which basically you don't have to like someone, that doesn't mean you can't live with someone, which was also a very new concept in the 16th and 17th century. I mean, there was discrimination. I mean, the Catholics weren't allowed to have public churches, so they had these what we call schuilkerken, or refugee churches? No, that's shelter churches. Shelter churches.
Yeah.
And then everybody knew where the shelter churches were, but you were not allowed to reveal to the world it was actually a church. So Catholics would have like a rich salesman or something would have his private little church, and all the Catholics from the neighborhood would go there, but he was not allowed to show in public that it actually was a church. So that was the doctrine of tolerance that the Netherlands had. But considering their relationship to the Catholic Church, it's not that weird. They were not on friendly terms with them. But yeah, that concept of tolerance was even part of their international doctrine. So that's why so many rich Jews came to the Netherlands during the Golden Age. So many rich Protestants, even Catholics came to the Netherlands because they knew they were relatively safe there. Unlike Germany, which was full-out civil war, and if you weren't a member of the right tribe, you'd be killed. So that's also a reason why the Netherlands got so extremely wealthy in the 16th and 17th century. I mean, there is a salesman, a merchant here in the Netherlands. A family still exists that owned the Danish crown. He literally slept on the Danish crown. That's a long story, but yeah. The only reason he wasn't king of Denmark... I think it was Denmark. Yeah, the only reason he wasn't king of Denmark was because he didn't have the time to rule Denmark and run his company. So, yeah, there's a little historical tidbit for you.
I mean, I know that a lot of European states, the motivation to go Protestant was in part the source of legitimacy as Catholicism, right? So if you could break from that source of legitimacy, it helped break away. And of course, Spain, eminently Catholic.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it was a lot of the conversions in that period was pure tribalism. Pure for political purposes. Yeah, we even have research into the period that indicates that the people, the common folk, didn't really care whether they had a Catholic preacher or Protestant one. So if they gone to the same church and one day the Catholic preacher was replaced with a Protestant one, they didn't care. All the statues may have been gone all of a sudden, but yeah.
Well, they all said the same thing, so...
Yeah, basically. Well, there are some fundamental differences between Protestantism and Catholicism. I mean, there is a reason why, especially in the United States, we now have these extremist, almost right-wing churches. But yeah.
Are you getting some of that taste of freedom?
Well, the thing with the Puritans was, like, in the Netherlands, right, we first had the Protestants, which were basically these people that said, okay, we don't like the Catholic faith, because of all its mysticism and its power and its hypocrisy. We just don't like it. And of course there was also the tribalism I already mentioned. It was a matter of picking a side. That's why William of Orange was born a Protestant, became a Catholic when he came to the court of Charles V. Was Charles V? Charles. And then he became Protestant again during the revolt. Because people say, why is our leader a Catholic? So... Yeah, the Spanish still hate him for that, by the way. They haven't forgiven William of Orange. But yeah, William of Orange was a secularist, in a sense. That's why we got the doctrine of... It was an early attempt at secularism. So, again, not a revolution there. But yeah, he was also conservative in other parts, so he was not that progressive, But yeah, it's. I forgot my train of thought. Where was I going with this?
Dude, you're so far away that I went with you and I don't even know.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, like Anachronistic society and the Netherlands, I think that one thing that we've gotten is, please actually, that 12 Dede has brought up a lot about we are still alive. I mean, I'm here, Dede. Yeah, a lot of the conversation in the chat has shifted to language and how people learn language. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to, like, language is one of those world building elements that you want to think about within anarchistic societies, and with, I don't know. I think that the Netherlands is such an interesting, in Belgium, they're both such interesting situations, and I didn't really know how bad the divide was between the Flemish and Wallonians. But
it's not that bad. It's only in case of language, but for the rest of the time we get along. We all drink the same beers. We all eat the same fries. We.
Well, how about your politicians, though?
Yeah, that's another thing. I don't like politics.
Yeah, because you're.
That's just so damn hard here in Belgium. You have like politicians for your town, then the politicians for your province, then the politicians for Flanders and the Walloons, then politicians in Brussels, and then you have one branch that overlaps everything again. So no, it's just too hard to understand. I really don't get it. Well, and whatever we do, it all stays the same. So.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the problem we're having currently with politics in general. Is this presence of identity politics? I think that's a major problem, and especially when politicians try to fight them over identity based on language. I think that's a major issue, and. Yeah, but let's go back to the chat. Sorry, chat, we ignored you a bit. Let's see, 12 BD. It's hard in Belgium, then Croatia is hell. I don't know enough about Croatia. I haven't involved myself in Croatia since the Balkan Wars.
You're right back.
So yeah, I'm not that familiar with Eastern Europe, unfortunately. What's happening in Western Europe is already taking so much of my time. Because I watch certain YouTubers, I know a little bit of what's going on in Romania, and that's about it.
I would love to go to Croatia, because I know it's a beautiful country, but that's the only thing I know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, how many languages do they speak in Croatia? Because I don't know what they did with the country after the war ended. Because there were a number of people living there. You had the Croats, the Serbians, then you had the Muslim population. Not sure what people those are, because in the news they were always referred to the Muslim population, and I think there was another. Wasn't there a third group? Oh man, it's so long. I mean, I kind of was shocked when I heard that the Balkan Wars were over 20 years ago. I was still going to high school when that happened. Time goes fast.
Too fast.
Yeah. But yeah, while I'm trying to find out the population makeup of Croatia, please continue the conversation. We have oh man, there's too much in this Wikipedia article on Yugoslavia. Man, that was the 90s. Darn.
Oh, so they speak one language, Croatian.
Okay.
After it's 12DD that says we speak one language, it's Croatian. After the war we became independent, and then we joined the EU, Europe, in 2013.
How old am I? Actually, this weekend I'll become 36, and I hope to have something of a. Birthday stream. Which is
so wait, how old are you?
36.
Really?
On the 2nd of June, this Saturday, I'll become 36.
No, I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, I know, I get that a lot. So, yeah, I hope to have a birthday stream. Not sure what we're going to talk about, but yeah, this stream ended up in a conversation about language and identity. So.
Well, it's something. It's very interesting. So
it is.
Why not?
And yeah, and I think it will play a major part. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about yet is, I mean, the Netherlands are traditionally a population of migrants, of immigrants. And also now we have huge immigrant populations. So it's also something, and I mean a lot of people don't want to talk about all the things that could happen. When we already talked about tribalism and the negative things that can have. So it's kind of worrisome what could happen in countries in the Netherlands with those minorities. The same goes for Belgium, I think.
Yeah.
You know, France has big pockets of immigrants. Same goes for Germany. Most Scandinavian and German countries, I suppose. So that's something I think a lot of people don't want to talk about, because it can go in really dark places. However, in case of an apocalypse like this huge calamity, you know, it might lead to people actually bringing populations closer together, because you're all suffering through the same calamity. So it could be interesting to see what kind of matchup you might get there, culturally and linguistically speaking. I mean, you probably have a phenomenon known as street language, where you are. You know what I'm talking about?
Known as what?
Street language, like this. This well, I wouldn't say necessarily working class dialect, but it's like this language that especially the younger generations develop, that is almost foreign to the native language.
Yeah, that's like here in Belgium. That's just yeah.
It goes further than just
dialect. It's a disaster. It's a disaster, because we already have so many different dialects, and then you have the street languages in that dialects. So, like, I'm from the West Flanders, and West Flanders is like, no one in Belgium will understand West Flanders except for the West Flemish people.
No, but that's dialect, right?
Yeah, that's the dialect. Yeah. But then you have the younger people who have their street language inside that dialect.
Oh man.
So that's West Flemish is known for speaking without spitting out half of the letters, and well, the younger people even leave out more letters than that. So it becomes even more even shorter and difficult, and yeah, it's really getting disastrous out here. Yeah, and if you go to the other side of Belgium, in Antwerp and like that, it's more the foreign culture that takes over. So more the Moroccan and Turkish young guys that put their words into the Flemish and Dutch language.
Oh man!
And so it's really difficult out here.
Yeah,
in case of language, but
well, you know, with all these types of cultures, and now you have this large discussion about radicalization in prisons. It's, man, we really need some solutions to those issues. Well, first off, we need to talk about those issues. I think that's one of the major problems we have right now. That people don't even want to discuss it. But yeah, let's continue on, because I read some articles on street language in the Netherlands, and you know for whom it's really a big problem? Educators. Educators can't communicate with their own students because the students don't speak normal Dutch. And I'm not talking about foreigners. No, I'm really talking about youth that has basically developed their own language. So now you have these educators that are trying to learn street language. So yeah, that is something major that could happen in a kind of a post-apocalyptic world, that nobody speaks the same language anymore. That everyone speaks dialect.
They've all grown apart. That definitely happens a lot in Ada, but in my instance, there is a unifying language. Part of that was those, because that's more convenient for, because you have the right language can be an annoying question, but yeah, definitely I explore the idea that there's degradation, even like in the English language in East Coast America. There's like different dialects that are not mutually intelligible unless you take the time to figure them out. It's always something to look into, but also if you have an active internet and stuff like that, it can unify a language, and even accents. Like if you look at America, almost all accents are being folded into a singular, and it's spreading through Hollywood and shit to the point where more and more English speakers are talking this similar way.
Right.
It's almost uncanny. Eventually, it approaches a consensus, right? Because it's simply the most efficient way to communicate is to mimic the most popular thing.
Right. Well, it's funny. Somebody just mentioned in the chat that people saying "lol" as a word, LOL. The internet speak is also a thing. Recently, I saw a documentary on the Dutch television on Kekistan, which is, well, if you're not familiar with it, it's a kind of a subculture or free speech movement. It's hard to explain just like that. So. Yeah, but they have these interviews with people who self-identify as Kekistani. And one guy from Arnhem, coincidence, was trying to explain Kekistan and why they use the Kekistan meme. But he was using words like normies and stuff like that. So every time the interviewer had to stop him, like, okay, well, what's a normie? So it's really interesting that we now also have this worldwide culture that who get their language from the internet, and have constructed their own language with words that have their own specific meanings. So yeah, I think one of language is a weird thing, man. Like, think about 1984 and Newspeak, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Not exactly.
In 1984, the book by Orwell, they have Newspeak, which is basically the state erasing words from the lexicon. And saying, you're not allowed to use these words anymore. Or no, these words don't mean what you think they mean. And that's the kind of the, people are using that now to describe what's happening in discussions like on political correctness and so on. So there is a very real world equivalent of that going on right now, what makes it all the more scary. But yeah, it's really interesting, the concept of Newspeak. And one of the quotes, I'm not sure if it's just from the movie, but also from the book, but one guy is explaining it. And like, look, this book, right now, this is our complete dictionary of words, and right now it's this thick, but the next edition will be thinner, and the next edition will be even thinner than that. Oh, and when the book is only one leaflet long, the revolution will be complete. Because they eliminated every way to transform thought into cohesive sentences. So, yeah, there will be words in a post-apocalyptic society. Words will become lost. Like democracy, or I don't know, what's another important word? Well, the word philosophy itself may become lost. Now, well, try explaining certain political systems without that. Good luck.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's interesting that that can happen deliberately through a program like that, or it can happen unintentionally just because it gets lost. Like, and a lot of it is based on what's in the home, and if you're trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic society, as broad of a vocabulary as you would if you're just able to exist without having to worry about where your food's coming from each day. And your kids are only, like, you might know a lot of words, but your kids are only picking up on certain things. It's also how technology gets lost. If you want to get the steampunk from a more modern time, that's a good way to do it. For example, like Tasmanians, they have culture and art that depicts what we had but lost. And I think that one important thing to know about the modern age is, like, if in an EMP scenario, yeah, there could be people around in the immediate aftermath who know how to do all this shit. But they're not going to teach their kids how to do that when what they need to do is survive or get food, right? And so, like, even if they try to preserve that knowledge, it's going to fall away over time. And words, the English language is bloated with all sorts of additional words. And without access to the internet or a very good and reliable dictionary source, fall apart and fall away, and they're not going to be used anymore. You'll basically get dead words that exist in theory, but nobody has any idea how to pronounce them because it hasn't been said in, you know, years, or they've never heard someone else say it. And then you're on all sorts of weird, because the average person doesn't know how to read phonetics, even though technically the information will still be stored, like it'll describe how to say it. Also, all those are based off of other words. So if you have started to say certain words and other sounds other ways, the whole system could be fucked, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, I just thought about a good example, right? I just talked about Newspeak and how people are giving different meanings to existing terms. Another one, a good example. Have you played? I think it was Fallout New Vegas. Have you played that one?
I haven't. So.
Okay. Well, there is this.
But I know the game.
Yeah. Well, there is this fragment in, I think it is called Old World Blues. You are in this old laboratory run by a bunch of demented AIs. Actually, their brains in jars, and, well, let's just say the liquid in which they float isn't so good for their brains. So they become really demented, and one guy is so indoctrinated, you know, because the whole Fallout universe is based on this world that was, you know, the Red Scare and this fight against communism, you know, and that, of course, brought to ridiculous extremes. And what did this guy, this brain in a jar, keeps calling you on the PA system, telling you have to fight the communists, and stuff like that. And yes, this person is a communist, and that person was a communist. And then you ask him, what's a communist? And then he doesn't know. Because he is so indoctrinated. You know, communism, bad. And, well, a matter of fact, you can see this in a lot of people today, you know. You know, that person is against this value or criticizes this part. That's why this person is now my enemy. This person is now a Nazi. And that's exactly the same thing as far as I'm concerned. So it's really interesting that words change their meaning because people don't understand the concept. And they just replace words like evil. Like communism just means evil, for example. Or Nazism just means evil. So that's something I expect to happen. A lot.
Yeah.
Which can be quite a scary concept. But, yeah, we're already talking well over 19 minutes. Is there anything in particular we still want to talk about? Because we have this entire conversation about language. Chat, is there anything you want to talk about? Please let us know. Is there something we have not covered? Not sure this is the conversation we wanted to have. Are you satisfied, Lee?
Definitely, and also check out Europa Burning when it drops on the 1st. Yeah, I mean, I just say, like, the conversation, like, topic became more broadly about the Netherlands in the future.
Okay, we can
obviously
do that.
I'm an indie RPG designer, tabletop RPG designer, and if any of you would like to check out my game, I would super appreciate it. It's only $8.50 on Drive-Thru-RPG, and you can come hang out in the Discord and read the wiki for free.
All right. Of course, I'll put the links down in the description, so please send them to me, Lee, after the show. How about you, Glenn?
Well, I've actually learned a lot, so I'm happy.
All right. Yeah. Well, maybe we can do this again on other countries. So if somebody's up, like I want to talk about Croatia or something, that might actually be a good idea because I happen to know a lot on this topic. But yeah, who knows? Could be interesting. So if there are no more questions from the chat, just watching, I don't see anything happening. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you know, please continue the discussion in the comments if you want to. If you have topics you want us to discuss on the show, please let us know. Always willing to try new topics. I have some talking to a interesting guest right now. Well, goodbye everyone. I hope you enjoyed this show. May not have exactly been what we intended to go out as, but really I had no idea where this entire discussion was going. So yeah, I hope to all see you next time. And of course, as always, make things your own.